Howdy. Recently, I wrote a blog about the concept of data virtualization, which by no means is my own concept or probably even a new concept, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I was thinking about and try and get your brains to wrap around some of these concepts here. So, in essence, what I was trying to say is effectively there's two types of data. There's production data, typically transactional production data, because I don't delineate between a transactional system that is a database update and call and a transactional system that is the creation or a delivery of a brand new email. Transactional sort of meaning it's in the moment, it's happening, it's real, it's in flux, it's dynamic, whatever your adjective is. And sort of everything else, non-production systems. So in the world of data, which if you read the blog, my contention is sort of why we're supporting all this stuff. And then we build infrastructure discussions to somehow supersede the fact that we do any of this stuff just to support the data attributes of application requirements that we have. Anyway, I digress. So my point is really that if you look at the data world from the perspective of there's production or transactional or influx data, there's data of the moment, and then everything else in our organizations, one way or another, is a copy of that data at some point in time. And so we take copied data or copied production data, as I refer to it in the blog, and we use it for everything else that supports our business. So it tends not to be the real-time transactional elements that support our business, but it's everything else. And that can range from things, what else? What do we do with production copies of data? We do backup. We do disaster recovery. We replicate for everything from backup and disaster recovery purposes to being able to replicate into auxiliary systems, for example. We provide test and dev services on net new applications or functional rollouts by testing against those data sets. We populate data warehouses. We do business intelligence. We run analytics. So it's all the myriads of stuff that happen in our organizations, but we're not necessarily doing it in real time at the transaction level itself. We're taking copies of that production or transactional data, and then we're keeping some of it forever, might be in an archive. We're keeping some of it for years. We're keeping some of it for weeks, days, months, could be minutes. Doesn't matter like that. But if my brain says if we can delineate between those two specific sort of macro data use cases, production and transactional, in the moment, non-production, copied data, out of the moment, and we should be able to categorize how we treat those elements differently. Right now, one of the big problems, maybe the biggest problem from a management and operations perspective, is even though 90-some-odd% of our data at any given time in general is copied data, we take copies of copies. And every single one of those application examples that I brought up, of which in a real company there might be hundreds, but every single one of those application examples that I bring up uses its own silo of stuff. And every single silo of stuff, even though it's the same underlying data, has different infrastructure associated with it, different management associated with it, different people associated with it, almost always different processes associated with it. So I'll give you a simple example. Today, if we just look at data protection, right? Data protection typically invokes snapshotting of perhaps the primary production system in order to take a copy of that production system to be able to be used in a point in time, and then is backed up for data protection reasons. So we use a backup process, backup software, backup hardware, backup people, all sorts of elements, 57 different steps in our process and oh, by the way, that backup software might every night spawn thousands of processes in order to collect all that information. At the root, that data is probably 99% exactly the same as the data that we spawned yesterday when we did the exact same set of processes and data protection and so on and so on. So the same zeros and ones that we took that snapshot originally, or that copy of primary production data, in order to do that backup, we probably also took a copy of it in order to populate our data warehouse, in order to, pick your other function du jour. We probably took a copy to perform test and dev overnight, or to run a build against, or to clean, or to look and populate our CRM system, and on and on and on. And so when you think about it, all these individual systems, our CRM system is entirely separate infrastructure 99% of the time, entirely separate processes, entirely separate application head, entirely separate people that interact with it, then is that data protection backup space. But all the data is the exact same. So why do we keep creating silo after silo after silo after silo ad infinitum if at the root everything is fundamentally the same? So wouldn't it be interesting? Not sure how we do this yet, but wouldn't it be interesting if, just like we always have a single system of record in our production environment, there's always one production thing for every single application. There's one set of that data. Now, we may mirror that data, but it's one set of production data, if you will. Why don't we do the same thing in non-production copied data? Why isn't there one set of non-production copied data, a master data of, or a data set of record, if you will? And from that, feed all these autonomous individual silos, whether they're virtual or physical infrastructure, and let the people that want to manipulate that data do whatever it is they want to do with it, but not necessarily have 73 different stacks of infrastructure and 73 different sets of copies of that same data, all at different points in time and all of this. And I'll just close my ramble with, if you think about one of the primary problems in big data today, or in data warehousing today, it's simply reclamation of all the exact same data sets that have one letter off, one digit off, one number off. You know, am I Steve Duplessie in one system and Stephen Duplessie in another system? I'm the same guy, right? But eventually I look like multiple, you know, I just keep bastardizing as I'm spread around an organization and used for all sorts of different purposes. Having one single master of record, one Steve Duplessis, is enough, for example, to be used in 57 different ways seems far more logical to me, and ultimately seems like, I mean, if you can extrapolate to the end of that equation, if there were one common system of record for all copied data that fed every single application area, in theory, you need one silo, at the very least one storage element, to be siloed to house and deliver that system of record of data to whatever application set you needed. So just that alone could collapse an overall physical storage footprint in an enterprise by orders of magnitude, conceivably, you know, let alone forgetting the dedupe and compression and all these other nifty things, but just having one instead of having 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 copies of any particular data record would conceivably save all that amount of physical space, all that power that's associated with it. All the storage management processes could be consolidated to one single silo throughout that organization for non-copied production data. Doesn't mean you have to touch anything in production. However you're doing production, you're doing production. Forget that for now. But you know why I say forget that for now? It's not that that's not also something you should consider, but it's this big compared to overall everything else that's in the copied data world. Production represents a pretty small piece. If you're a big giant shop, maybe it's 20%. But in the rest of us, the real world, 95% of the stuff that we're doing is not in that production transactional real-time dynamic system. So think about that for a little while. Maybe that'll start to change the way you're thinking. Thanks.